tonight. We're going to start with a short performance by Alex and Karen from the USA.
Paint you a picture in my head with the sweetest whites and the reddest of red. Stretch you upon the starry sky. Maybe a place where we can lie and see it all. Oh, the leaves are falling, the leaves are falling. Oh, for us, yeah. Oh, the sea is calling, the sea is calling. Story of our life. It's clear as day and it's dark as night. 10,000 words, but none will do. 'Cause all there are excuses for truth. Oh, the leaves are falling, the leaves are falling. Oh, for us, yeah. Oh, the sea is calling, the sea is calling out to us. Are there ever enough colors? Is there ever enough time? Is there ever a way for us to make this right? Are there ever enough colors? Is there ever enough time? Is there ever a way for us to make this right? 'Cause it's always, it's on my mind. We're just going to play a couple songs for you. I don't know, maybe instructions from the back as we speak. But maybe one more song? One more song. Okay, that sounds appropriate. Yeah, we're here to welcome you to this conference. And unfortunately, we won't be able to stay and attend all the sessions and enjoy the weekend like you all. But we're going to Paris, so I don't feel so bad. It's a pleasure to play for you here, and thank you to Benita for inviting us. She walks around with the wind to her back, forgetting all the things that she likes. Oh, and I, oh,
Energy and Pathways to Future Society. We're glad you could all make it tonight.
So, we would like to introduce ourselves. My friend Christian.
And my friend Ada. We're your hosts for this weekend. Also, there's a bunch of other volunteers around, and we're responsible for you enjoying this weekend. So if you have any questions, please feel free to approach any of us. We have a little organizer thing written on our name tag. So yeah, don't hesitate to ask us anything.
Okay, so a little bit about ourselves. We are recent graduates of a master's program, postgraduate program Renewable Energy, or PPRE. Is a 1.5 year long master program which focuses on renewable energies and their implementation.
So we wanted to organize this workshop to provide an opportunity to investigate the feasibility of achieving sustainable development using renewable energy. And at the same time, we wanted to debate the societal aspects of establishing a sustainable way of living.
Therefore, our aim throughout this workshop is to investigate and learn what the present effects of consumption are, what sustainability and efficiency mean, and how we can apply these concepts in our everyday life.
We also want to discuss the limitations of renewable energies, how renewables can be sustainable, and what the interaction between renewables, society are, and possible future sustainable pathways.
So with the help of DAD, Millennium Express, PPRE, and the University of Oldenburg, we have organized this workshop to explore the ideas of renewable energy and sustainability. And we hope that you will enjoy this workshop and you're staying here in Oldenburg. So, at this point, we would like to welcome the first speaker of our workshop, Professor Niko Paech, who will give an introduction to post-growth economics. Niko Paech is a German economist and since 2010 holds the chair on production and environment at the University of Oldenburg. He focused on research lies in the fields of environmental physics, environmental economics, ecological economics, and sustainability science.
But Niko Paech goes beyond just theory. He also incorporates sustainable practices into his everyday life. For example, he doesn't travel by plane, he doesn't own a car, or even a cell phone. So it is our great honor to present to you Professor Niko Paech. Come up.
Just press it on.
Hello everybody. Before I start, I would like to thank you for inviting me. It's a great honor for me to talk to you because usually the public, whenever I give a lecture, consists of economists and not of experts on renewable energy. As you know, I'm called a growth critic. And what I can do today, because there are not only limits to growth, but also a limit of time, the only thing I can do is to give you some insights or a kind of overview concerning the so-called post-growth movement. And the only thing I can manage today is to arouse your curiosity on all aspects concerning an economy without growth. And I would like to start with a small overview concerning the history of sustainable science. And the history maybe started 40 years ago or so by publishing the first report of the Club of Rome. The title is well known, you already heard about it. It's called The Limits to Growth. And since then, we do have two different schools of thought, or two different interpretations of the content of sustainability. On the one hand, we have the paradigm of green growth. That means we try to decouple our material wealth and, of course, economic growth from environmental damages by using technological innovations. The main assumption is that economic growth can be decoupled from material and energy flows by using two certain principles of sustainability, namely ecological efficiency and ecological consistency. I will deepen both principles, but as far as I know, you already are very, well, thank you very much. You are used to handle one of these principles, namely consistency. Consistency means if you use it in the area of energy production, consumption or transformation, means to use renewable energies, of course. And if you take a deeper look onto this decoupling or green growth strategy, there is a kind of a philosophy of social policy and creating a society as a whole. Growth is a kind of peacemaker. That means that growth needs to create a kind of backlog demand for wealth instead of redistribution. So growth is a measure to have more social justice without redistributing the already created wealth. This is the main idea. It is very convenient for politicians to create growth compared with a situation where you have to reduce the wealth of the rich of the society. And the main area of taking measures is the technological change, for example, product or technological or even service innovations. And in some cases, this kind of interpretation of sustainability is connected with the so-called triple bottom line model. That means you try to create a kind of balance of all the different interests that you can identify in a modern consumer society. Economic interests, social interests, and of course ecological interests. Okay. On the other hand, we do have a very, very small movement of growth critics, or what I call the post-growth movement or economy. And here the main assumption is a different one. Critics of the growth paradigm state that permanent economic growth can neither be ecologically neutralized or optimized, nor preserved over time, because there are further limits, not only ecological limits. And the main principles to foster a movement towards a post-growth economy are the sufficiency movement, that means to create modest forms of demand, of consumption, and mobility, of course. And in this case, the redistribution of income becomes more important, because post-growth economy is linked to a kind of a zero-sum game. That means if you want to enhance the possibilities of poor parts of the society, you have to take something from the rich parts of the society. This is redistribution instead of taking measures to foster growth with the intention to have more social justice concerning the income distribution or the wealth distribution. And what we need here in this case is not a technological change, it's more a cultural change. That means we do not have so much technological or product innovations, but more institutional innovations. For example, tendency towards modest structures and supply logistics or supply chains. Supply chains with reduced distance between consumption and production, for example. And in this case, we have a different interpretation, because here, in this case, we would conclude that the ecology is a kind of limits that cannot be altered by technological innovations. Okay. Now, the structure of the post-growth economics may be described as a kind of science area. It's a new science area, of course. It's a kind of sub-discipline of economics, and it addresses all interesting or relevant or important questions that concern the relationship between growth and sustainability. And to keep it very short and not so complex, there are three very important categories of questions or categories of science interest. The first question is, ongoing growth of the gross domestic product is not an option anymore. Why is this the case? I shall deepen this question during the next minutes. The second very important question is, what are the compulsions or the drivers of economic growth? Why is it not possible to stabilize a modern consumer society or an industrialized economy without having a constant growth of the GDP? And here are two different questions, because we have to analyze the so-called push factors that are growth drivers. They are located at the supply side of the economy. They are strongly linked with the capital intensity of production. On the other hand, we have so-called pull factors that force the economy into a growth paradigm, and the pull factors are located on the demand side of an economy. They are coined by the culture, the tradition, and the interpretation of a good life, of a good well-being, and so on. Okay, and the most important question of post-growth economics are the characteristics of an economy without growth. This is what I call the post-growth economy. But of course, the post-growth economy is a concept that I developed, and it does not encompass all the points of view within the in the sustainable development that are part of the post-growth movement. There are very different points of view within the field of growth critics. Okay? So let's start with the question, why is economic growth not an option anymore to develop or to manage modern societies? There are different levels on which we can find reasons for this assumption, for this thesis. Because I do not have so much time, I will only present four main reasons. The first, and I do think most relevant reason for the fact that growth is not an option anymore, is that all the attempts or the vision of a dematerialized economy turns out to be a kind of modern religion or alchemy. In many cases where we try to decouple the economic growth, or where we tried to neutralize ecological damages of a modern consumer society, these attempts not only failed, but they contributed sometimes even to create more or more different ecological problems. It's not very nice to tell you that I even think that renewable energies are not a solution to any problem. Renewable energies are a kind of transforming one problem to a different system or to a different category of problems. Think about the bioenergy in northern Germany, here in Lower Saxony, then you know or get an expression of what I'm talking about. Okay. So we do have different so-called rebound effects. We do have materialized rebound effects, and we do have financial rebound effects. And these effects, in many cases, outbalance any progress in efficiency or consistency. So if you try to increase the GDP, you always have two effects, because it is not possible to increase the GDP without an increase in real production. But what kind of products, what kind of services, or what kind of technological innovations that you have to add, otherwise there is no growth, can be described without causing any further ecological damages. It's a matter of degree, but there is no further production that can be completely decoupled from environmental damages, or that can be completely produced without any ecological impact. On the other hand, if you increase the material wealth, that means an increase in the gross domestic product, you always have an increase in the income. So how can you dematerialize further income? It is not possible, at least in a democratic society, because it is not forbidden to take any euro that you earn by building wind turbines and buying tickets to fly to a different continent, or to buy a car or a new computer. These are financial rebound effects. And so you have two different problems. The materialized rebound effects concerning the production side of economic growth, and the financial rebound effects stemming from the increase of income that you have as a consequence of economic growth. And this is the only reason to have economic growth, to increase the income. There is no other reason. Okay? So this is one problem, and I shall dwell on this problem during the next minutes. The second level of growth criticism addresses the question, is it possible to have more justice in one country or in the global sphere by using economic growth as a tool of social policy? I do not think so. There are even theoretical arguments against this thesis that there is a possibility to have more income, justice, for example, and so on. What we see is that in some developing countries there is a new middle class of consumers. And of course there are benefits to this middle class, but on the other hand, the poorest parts of a society still do not have any benefits if there is more growth. It is even possible that the situation, that the welfare situation of the poorest subsystems of society, that the situation is even worse after a phase or a wave of more economic growth. Then the third level, there is a very important result of the so-called science of happiness. And the most important result is that after reaching a certain level of material wealth, consumption, mobility, communication, digital communication, and so on, after this level further increases no longer contribute to an increase of well-being or luck, or happiness, or more freedom, for example. And then on the fourth level, we do have material limits to growth. I do not think that it is necessary to explain what peak oil, peak soil, or peak everything is. Okay, you know already this kind of mound. It's not the German Zugspitze, it's the peak oil. That means that it is very, very difficult to increase the amount of crude oil from the supply side. And I do not think that fracking is really a solution. Maybe the next 10 years we will experience that the price for crude oil will decrease as a consequence of fracking. But after that, fracking will turn out also to be a very exhausted resource. Okay. So if we take a look on the ecological limits that we face, I do think that the most important limit is the carbon limit. So there is a kind of consensus, especially in Europe, but also further on this planet, that the 2 degrees Celsius climate protection target has to be met. But how can we reach this aim? There is a kind of global carbon budget that we still have, and these are 750 billion tons of CO2 until 2050. And if we do not take into account the further population growth, and if we try to distribute this global budget of carbon, including all persons that live nowadays on this planet, the result is that each of us has an individual budget of 2.7 tons of carbon emission per year, per capita and per year. And if we apply the idea of sustainable development, it is not necessary only to meet ecological stability or the 2 degrees Celsius climate protection target. It also means that we have to take measure to achieve a kind of global justice. Therefore, I just propose to redistribute the wealth concerning the usage of this kind of global carbon budget. That means that we have to develop a kind of model that implies that the CO2 intensive lifestyles have to reduce the per capita carbon emissions so that the target corridor that can be globalized is reached. On the other hand, for example, in Africa, we have to take into account that, of course, people who do not have, that are in a situation of undersupply, need more growth, even a growth critic accepts that this is absolutely necessary, of course, because we need a system of food supply. We need education, a modern system of education, also in Africa. And of course, we need a kind of health security. And these are aspects of well-being that need to be produced. Therefore, we have to allow that in regions where people live without meeting the target corridor because they do consume not enough, that there is a kind of growth. After that, we would meet a situation that is can be described as a balance of meeting ecological constraints on the one hand, and a kind of global justice, of fairness on the other hand. This should be a kind of interpretation of sustainable development applied to the aspects of climate protection. And of course, what I just mentioned at the beginning of my talk, here we have a kind of conflict. On the one hand, it is argued that it is possible to meet this conception by measures of green growth. In Germany, we talk about the Energiewende, as you know. And on the other hand, we have the post-growth movement. Decoupling economic growth to foster a kind of green growth means that we can apply two different principles of sustainability. Decoupling means that the GDP still increases on the one hand, and on the other hand, the CO2 emissions should be reduced. How is this possible? From a theoretical view, there are two possibilities. One is the so-called ecological efficiency. That means that we minimize the ecological resources, that means the material input, to achieve a certain level of supply. That means to have an optimized input-output relation. This can be applied, of course, to energy production or energy transformation. For example, if you use a car with an efficient motor, for example, or if you have a better insulation of the walls of houses, for example. The second principle is very often called ecological consistency. That does not mean to minimize the input, but that means that we try to create closed loops within the system of production, in this case, in the system of energy production. Zero emission technologies, for example. That means that we try to increase the ecological quality of the material or energy resource transformation. There are different ideas to achieve a kind of consistency approach. As I just mentioned, for example, biological or technological closed loops, for example, biodegradable t-shirts also, or a computer that is constructed in a way that each module that you have can reuse after this computer is broken, for example. Okay, but the most important contribution to ecological consistency is, of course, using renewable energy resources, because it is said that renewable energies are a kind of zero-emission system. Okay. And some statistics say that we did achieve something in Germany, for example. So the intensity of carbon emission of the German economy has been reduced. But the problem is that there are lots of rebound effects due to the growing consumer demand. Because the intensity, the carbon intensity of one unit of material wealth does not say anything about the level of the output. Furthermore, in Germany, we experience that not decoupling, but the breakdown of whole industries in the eastern part of Germany is the reason for this so-called decoupling. And then there is a different reason, which is even more important, because the dirty part or the energy-intensive part of the production of all the things that we consume in Germany has been shifted to other regions. Because there is no adequate or macroeconomic data situation which describes the shifting of the energy intensive part of the production concerning Germany. I show you some very new data concerning Switzerland. 60% of all environmental damages caused by the standard of living in Switzerland are not located in Switzerland, but out there, for example in Asia. And this is a very main problem because all these data that try to prove that decoupling is taking place in Europe are not very reliable. Here we have some data as a graphic from the Global Carbon Project, and here we have a kind of decomposed effects of the green growth paradigm. On the one hand, you have the consistency effect. This is the carbon intensity of one energy unit. And as you can see, there is no progress. Especially, this is the whole global energy situation. But only this situation is relevant because we shifted all the energy-intensive production parts. For example, in Germany, but also in Switzerland, and so on. Then you have the efficiency effect that expresses the energy amount for one welfare unit. Here it is described as a so-called purchasing power parity. So this is necessary to have a level on which you are able to compare the demand and production effect among different countries. So, and then you have the whole effect, the decoupling effect. This is the blue bottom line there. This expresses the carbon intensity of one welfare unit, of one GDP or purchasing power parity unit. And as you can see, there is no progress anymore. There is even an increase in the most important line, and this is the whole carbon emission on this planet. Okay. So decoupling of growth from CO2 emissions is not sufficient. Here you see the energy mix of the whole planet, taking into account the part of the renewable energies. I have to apologize because here we have German expressions. It is a scan, so I was not able to translate that. Not even 1% of the whole primary energy on planet Earth consists of renewable energies. And there is no increase in the tendency because there is a renaissance of coal-fired power stations. Not only in Australia, in China or India, but in Germany. Take a look onto the coal industry, for example in Cologne or in a region in eastern Germany that is called Lausitz, where we have very, very great areas that are completely damaged by still increasing the coal output for German coal-fired power stations. That's the problem. The reason is very clear, because there is no solution for the storage of electricity. This is a great implications or impacts of the specialized production systems that we have. The more technology you use, the longer the distance is of a supply chain, the more capital you need, the more is there a kind of growth imperative. Because any capital you have to invest in needs to be exploited by paying a profit for the owners of capital or paying interest rates to the bank where you get the capital. Therefore, industrial specialization creates growth drivers, growth imperatives. This is one side of the medal. This is the supply side. This is very, very simplified what I'm telling you here, but it's too complicated to tell you the complex systems of growth drivers on an evening. Okay. Then we have pull factors. You could say cultural factors of growth. In modern societies, we have a culture of a pursuit of material self-actualization, of material freedom, of a kind of identification and social distinction by means of consumption. And of course, not only consumption, but also using electronic, using nice clothes or globalized mobility, housing, and so on. And these are cultural coined drivers of growth on the demand side. Systems of fulfilling basic needs. Then we have a kind of combination between self-sufficiency and globalized economic structures. For example, regional economy systems. And then, of course, to stay modern, we still need a kind of globalized industrial systems. For example, this notebook has not been produced in Germany. I think that is clear. It comes from China, as far as I know. But the question is, do I need so much of these notebooks, or is it possible to reduce the amount of demand by 50%, for example? This is the question. Okay. So there are two main streams or main points where we can take measures towards a post-growth economy. Reduce and reconstruct or alter the industrial structures. And I would like to introduce a kind of economic theory of reduction or sufficiency. And then, of course, I would also take a look onto the possibility to have a combination of production systems consisting of a small amount of industrialized output and also an amount of non-industrialized output. So, to deepen the theory of sufficiency, there is one very important question. Is there a kind of maximum of products that consumers could desire? This is a mathematical theory, and I only can give you some small or simplified insights, of course. It's a kind of theory of economies of time. I do think that time is an underrated resource that each and every person needs to fulfill needs or wishes. It is not possible to consume without using time. For example, drinking water means I need time. Sorry, it's also your time, because you have to wait. What you see here is a kind of utility function. This utility function describes the relationship of the amount of time that you need to increase your well-being by consuming a good or by enforcing a kind of consumption activity. Be it going to a party or flying to Colombia or consuming a lecture. That means the more time you invest in an activity of consumption, the more is the utility or the well-being or the happiness that you have. And the problem is, there are limits, because you only have 24 hours a day. And you're not even able to use all the 24 hours to consume, because you have to sleep, to eat, and you have to do other things that are necessary to stay alive. Later on you have to work, or you have to spend time on the master program, for example, in your case. After subtracting all these time amounts, you still have 3 or 5 hours a day that may be described as pure consumption time. Consumption time is a resource that you need. You not only need money to buy the consumption goods, you also need time to use them. So the problem that we have in modern consumer societies, not in Africa, not in Latin America, of course, but the problem that we have is we do have more money to buy things than we have time to use the things. This is the reason why sufficiency does not mean to become poor. Sufficiency is a kind of freedom. That's the point. Okay. The next step is, how can we fulfill needs without industrial production? Is this possible? Once again, I will give you only a very simplified sketch of this side of the model. Urban subsistence means to create things without money, without technology, without crude oil, and so on. On this comic, you see a person, and this person is not a consumer anymore. It is a prosumer or a co-producer. This creature consumes still because this person works 20 hours. In a conventional economy that is small, so that we all only are able to have a 20-hour employment or a job. So the money that this person earns may be enough to consume in a sufficient way. But then there are 20 further hours that can be used as a resource for self-sufficiency or urban or modern creative subsistence. Time is a resource. If I repair a computer so that it can be used not 5 but 10 years, I need time. So therefore, time is a resource that substitutes for industrial production. If I'm able to repair my clothes so that I do need only half of the amount compared with the normal situation, I only need half of the money that has to be spent on buying textiles. But I need time to repair and to maintain clothes or other things that I consume. So time is a substitute for money, for crude oil, for industry production, and for globalized supply chains. But time is not the only input that you need to be able to enforce or practice urban subsistence. The second resource is craft, manual skills, and other competences, doing things with your hands, of course. So time and craft are the main inputs. But then there is a third input, social interaction. For example, networks of people who not only help each other, but exchange different competences. One person is able to work in a community garden, the other one is able to repair or maintain, for example, computers, or furniture, or textiles. The third person is an owner of a car, and you can use his or her car by giving some output from the urban garden project you're working in, using your 20 hours and your special craft that is adequate for gardening, for example. So social interaction is also needed. Time, manual skills or crafty competence, and of course social interaction. These are inputs that can be combined to substitute industrial output. And there are three categories of subsistence outputs. First, sharing usage of products, for example, car sharing without money, or computer sharing, beamer sharing. Then the extension of the use period of consumption goods, for example. We can use our capabilities to repair or to maintain, or in some cases to upgrade, to rebuild material goods. And if we are able to increase the use period by, for example, 100%, you can reduce the need of production new goods. The same is true for the first category of subsistence outputs. If 2 persons use 1 camera, and most of the people of one society or one economic system follow this example, we can reduce the need of camera production by 50%. Okay, and the third category of subsistence output is own production. As I just mentioned, the community gardening movement, for example, is a good example for a kind of do-it-yourself culture. So we work in a garden without oil, without machines, without money. We create our own food as far as possible. So in this world, we have 2 dimensions of our existence from the perspective of the economy. First, we work 20 hours and get money to buy things, as usual. On the other hand, we try to create output without money, without markets, without enterprises, and without a high amount of technological hardware. There is another possibility to describe the transformation of our actual situation towards post-growth economy. The first thing we have to do is reduction by using the logic of the economies of time that I just tried to explain in a very simplified way. That means sufficiency. The second level is non-market work, as I just described, by time, craft, and social interaction. The third level is to create regional systems of production. There we have money, there we have markets, enterprises, and there we have a modern division of labor. But then still, there remains another level on which we still have to produce, in a modest way, industrial goods. Even if we are able to reduce the amount of cars, of cameras, of notebooks, textiles, furniture, and so on, these residual demand has to be produced. Therefore, post-growth economics does not mean to live without any industrial production. So then, of course, we have a kind of political level where we have to address policy measures. For example, social policy, distribution policy. The income tax is also a kind of measure that we have to enforce to create a situation in which the income distribution in a post-growth economy is fair, so that global justice is not only a vision but becomes a kind of reality, of course. Okay, small conclusion. The first thing that I tried to explain, of course, in a very simplified way, was that a kind of dematerialized economy, that means to foster a kind of green growth, is a modern kind of alchemy. It does not work. That does not mean that there is an alternative, for example, for renewable energies or for energy efficiency. We need these technologies. But it would be wrong to think that it is possible to stabilize a modern consumer society by using only technological measures. This is the point, and not that we can create a modern life without modern technology. That's the point. The social logic of economic growth does not work because in a modern consumer society we are strongly dependent on money, on markets, on technology, on the stability of financial markets. And we are also dependent on material resources. But financial crisis, peak oil, peak everything and so on, is a problem that we are not able to solve only by political or by technological measures. So we have to become resilient. Resilience means not to be dependent anymore alone on industrialized production. Another very important implication is that there is a kind of limit to happiness. The science of happiness shows that after reaching a certain level of consumption, we run out of time to use all the things. And then consumption can even become a kind of barrier to be happy, or to have a high level or an acceptable level of well-being. Okay, economic basis, I just mentioned it, of course. So the main principles are reduce and redefine the balance of consumption and of self-production, of becoming a kind of co-producer. Okay, I think that's all. You're just waiting. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. That was a very interesting talk, and I'm sure it's raised a lot of questions. So if you don't mind sticking around for a few minutes, I'd like to take some questions to the audience. If anyone has any questions, one of these two people will hand you a microphone and you can ask us. And if you could please introduce yourselves, that would be
Hi, my name is Marcus. My question is that all of the countries in the world have debts, all of the companies have debts right now, because they are not only using the Eigenkapital, they have some money lent from banks and so on. And what you're suggesting is that we should grow a lot less, but that would mean that they could never pay back those debts, which would, well, result in a big crash or something. How do you think we could transform our present society so that we don't depend on, well, that we don't have to pay all of this back?
I do think that any transformation towards post-growth economy can only be described as a process like step by step. So we have to create small social islands where sufficiency pioneers exercise first attempts to create post-growth compatible lifestyles and systems of production, step by step. This is the only thing that works as far as I'm able to think. So I do not believe that there is a political solution, because the majority of modern consumer societies still votes for parties that declare that growth is without any alternative. Small networks, for example, like the transition towns or other concrete projects within the context of do-it-yourself cultures, for example, the urban gardening projects, or even repair networks. We just created one repair network in Oldenburg. This is an attempt to foster a very, very silent and slow revolution, becoming more independent with regard to industrialized production systems.
But don't you think for like a real revolution that's big enough to make a change, we would need a big crash so that all of the people realize we have to change something?
I do not believe in crashes or in great disaster situations. What I really believe is that the next financial crash will happen. This is true, because we did not learn anything from the last financial disasters, as far as you know. And the second thing I really believe is that modern industrialized societies will experience a psychological crisis, because the burnout syndrome, for example, or the amount of depression as a really kind of sickness is very, very relevant, because we are not able to cope with all these multi-optional materialized freedoms. This is one point. And the second escalation that we are going to experience in the near future is, of course, peak everything. I do really think that peak soil, peak coltan, or peak neodyme, is that right? Sorry, you know it because you're the experts on wind turbines. I mean, all these substances and these very seldom minerals are becoming more and more expensive. But our standard of living, especially in Europe, depends on these resources. And these resources will become expensive, and therefore there is a slowly decrease of our purchasing power. And this forces us to adopt other systems, other networks, other practices of fulfilling needs outside the industrialized and globalized sphere. So no one need to be afraid, because I do not think that that's a great disaster. No.
I don't know, but I think if we are to reach the CO2 targets of to limit the global warming to 2 degrees, I have a friend who works on climate models, and she says it's basically too late to start now. So it maybe to follow up, maybe a slow transformation would be a little too slow.
So what is the alternative?
I don't know.
Okay, that's the point. I mean, there is no one in this room who has a kind of perfect foresight. So you cannot. I mean, of course, it is possible that there is a very slow beginning of a transformation, and after reaching a kind of critical mass of participants of a sufficiency or a self-sufficiency tendency, then there will be a kind of very, very strong dynamic. I would not exclude this possibility, but what I experience at the moment does not lead to the implication that there is an alternative to these slow beginnings that we see in some niches of the modern society, as I just mentioned, transition towns and so on and so on.
Yeah, please.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. My name is Carla from Ecuador, from Pamplona. And you were saying that economic growth happened based on that we have a desire for higher income because we want to consume more. So that could be a case in a developed country, for example. But if we think about, let's say, Latin America, it's not necessary that we want a higher income only to consume, but also to ensure security. So your model that you propose it's taking the part of the self-sufficiency that needs craft and work, self-work and social interaction, and for that you need to be young. And the other part where you're not having higher income. So without a higher income, let's say you cannot save, so therefore you cannot ensure your security. For example, in the developing countries. I don't know what you think in this case, for example.
Yeah. I did not exclude the possibility that there is still growth in. Okay, here is the adequate slide. That there is still necessary growth in countries that are below the target corridor. So a modern civilized infrastructure, including security, for example, does need a kind of production level, but if we really want to fulfill the 2 degrees Celsius climate protection target, we have to accept this. And then we have to focus on the most important things. That means, for example, more security, less cars and flights, for example. We have to decide what are the most important things that we need to stay or become a modern, democratic, and fair, with regard to social policy, society. This target corridor means that we cannot fulfill each and any need or consumption desire. We have to decide on priorities, for example. And I do think that security is maybe more important than mobility or the consumption of luxury, for example. This is a decision that we have to work on. There is no alternative.
I was thinking specifically on the case that from your model, you are accounting on the fact that you already have a house from where you're working and doing your yourself. Yeah? So when you don't have the possibility of having this house in the first place, that you don't have that situation for when you go to be able to.
Yes, of course. I assume that in a world where any individual of a society meets this target corridor, that we do not sleep in the open, of course. But the question is whether each family or each individual person needs an own house, or whether we have more centralized forms of living to save energy, to save soil, to save minerals, and even to save consumption goods. Because if you live in a house together with other individuals or with families, you can share the use of a car or a refrigerator or washing machine and so on. So there are very interesting perspectives concerning the security of living in a house.
Thank you.
With the microphone.
So I have the microphone. Yeah, hello, my name is Johannes from Oldenburg. And I have actually 2 short questions. Short. Are you familiar with the work of Konrad Schmidt from, I think he's Canadian? He just published a book called Efficiency Shifting. I think it's similar to your idea. And what he says is that we need to take the efficiency that we get in certain areas, that we need to put those into areas where we cannot become more efficient. Taking care of elderly people, or organic and urban gardening. Those are things that you need to put a lot of labor in. So I think he's basically having your model, but he's calling it efficiency shifting. Second question, I like the idea of basic income a lot. So that bedingungsloses Grundeinkommen. And I was wondering how you think that would fit into your model.
Okay. Beginning with the second question, I do think that this income construction becoming kind of income without working for it. This is the main idea of the German bedingungsloses Grundeinkommen. I do think that this is not a very adequate solution because it is very consistent with industrialized production systems. Because this is the reason for this construction. And I do think that post-growth economy is an alternative to this income without meeting any condition. Because I do think that to stabilize, not even economic, but also social systems, to stabilize it, you need a kind of reciprocal relationship between taking and giving. And if you cut this relationship, there is no ceiling for wishes that you can create in the sense of consumption and mobility. So this is one of the reasons why I do not believe in the fixed income without meeting any labor condition and so on. But there are different other reasons. I do not think that this idea is consistent, that it is really enforceable in a modern society. Now to the other point, no, I did not hear of this book, but there is so much literature, so there are so many visions and so many narratives concerning a kind of efficiency revolution. But in the meantime, the voices of the persons who really believe in efficiency are becoming more and more silent, because there is no technology that generates more efficiency that you can have without further ecological damages. On the other hand, efficiency means that you probably have more income. And the most important problem is, for many environmental problems, there is no efficiency solution. Think of cars, think of airplanes, for example. And the other problem is, even if there is a kind of theoretical efficiency solution, you never know whether it works in the real life, because efficiency solutions not only depend on the technological characteristics of the innovation, they also depend on the economic, the political, the social, the cultural, and the administration framework. For example, in Germany, we experienced that, for example, Volkswagen invented the so-called 3-liter Lupo, a very small and very efficient car. Nowadays, you cannot find it anymore. This is the point. Or in the field of housing, for example, there are so many efficiency solutions, but they are expensive. And in a democratic society, you cannot force the people to adopt these solutions, especially when they are very expensive. This is the point. So, but this is not. But I do not want to say that that is wrong to try to get more efficient. But in some areas, we exhausted all the possibilities of efficiency. For example, passive houses are just invented since 2 decades, but they didn't make any difference because there is no process of diffusion of this technology. The reason is that we have already old houses, and it is not possible to transform these houses into passive houses, for example. The same is true for some other problems. And what you mentioned, urban gardening and so on, this is not efficiency. This is sufficiency. So sometimes these concepts are a little bit puzzled. Okay.
Well, maybe. The idea is that we take
the work that's now done by machine. So where the efficiency is so high, as what you said, that we cannot make it more efficient. That we take the time that we save there, not to raise the capital, but to use the time that has been saved to do things regional, as the same as you suggest. So therefore shifting the efficiency from, that's the idea. So
Oh, sorry, I probably misunderstood what you just tried to explain. Okay, so efficiency shift means, or can even mean, that there is less efficiency in the sense of the economic interpretation of the efficiency terminus. Okay, okay, this would be very similar to the logic.
that's why I was asking if
to
you
the
know
logic of self-sufficiency production systems in the world of post-growth economics. Okay, I see. What was his name? Konrad Schmidt.
Konrad Schmidt, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. I very much enjoyed the.
Okay, so sorry. Okay.
I very much enjoyed the language in which you communicated the concept of sufficiency. Thank you very much. But my question is not on sufficiency. So you said, I mean, even in the post-growth society, we need residual infrastructure, which is obvious. So we need energy to maintain this infrastructure anyway. So my question is, how do you think renewable energies can be integrated in post-growth society in a more sustainable way, so that they don't fall in the trap of everlasting increasing demand? Do you think is there a way wherein we integrate renewable energies into the post-growth economy in more intelligent ways so that they don't follow the convention?
Of course, renewable energies has to be integrated in the framework of post-growth economy. But because of the fact that even renewable energies cannot be created, transformed, or used without ecological damages, we have first to reduce the demand of energy to reach a level that can be met by using renewable energies within ecological limits. This is the point. So there is no alternative to renewable energies. But the point is to ask what is the adequate amount. This is the point. So the landscape that we use in Germany to produce wind or solar power is a critical factor. But this is not an argument to say that there is something wrong with renewable energies. We have to question the amount. And I do also think we have to preserve or to protect some areas. Or we have to decide no wind turbines in this area, for example. But what I really think is, if we reduce the industrialized system, then we get more soil that is already not part of the natural area anymore. For example, highways or airports are very nice places to build wind turbines or photovoltaic panels. So, of course, without renewable energy, a post-growth economy is not possible. To take it short.
Thank you.
All right, we have a question in the back here. Okay.
First.
Good afternoon, my name is Augusto Bustamante, I come from Ecuador. Thank you very much for the presentation, it was really interesting for me. Actually, I was living in Israel 1 year ago, and I live in a place, they call this kibbutz. And they look like this post-war economy because they grow their own plants, they grow their own animals, they cook themselves, they cook.
Very delicious.
And they live in this kibbutz have more or less 300 people, and along Israel there are more or less 600 kibbutz. sell the electricity to the city, and they buy electricity because it's cheaper to buy it instead of consuming themselves. I think this is this example of post-war economy. And I'm not economist, but I think this is communism, where they can share their abilities to live comfortable. Besides this example, I'm from Latin America, then we have very close Cuba example. And they also live in this kind of post-war economy, even though they are a developing country, because they have restricted economic sanctions for the United States part, and they are living in an energy efficiency economy because they don't have energy, they don't have oil, they don't have anything. They live in an island, and for example, the people cannot drive to other city without any permission. And at the end, the concepts you are telling us here, if we have to travel too much, we are producing a lot of contamination, but at the end, we will have to stay in our cities in order to not to contaminate. This is the solution, and then we will leave the democracy to live in a kind of dictatorship or something like this. And the end of my intervention is almost, let's say, 90% of the people look at Cuba like the bad example, the bad guys, how they could do this to the people. But when you meet at least 90% of the Cubans, they are happy with the system because they say we have everything. We don't need, for example, have an iPhone 5. They don't need it, and they live with the things they have. Okay. Thank you.
I'm not so familiar with the kibbutz movement in Israel, which is quite old. I do think that the first creations of kibbutzes have been started decades ago. But what I heard about these constructions make me believe that these are very rural constructions, and therefore the kibbutz constructions are not adequate to form a self-sufficiency in mega cities, for example. So we need solutions even in urban spheres. This is the point. So maybe these are very good solutions for the rural areas, but we need refined social constructions for big cities, where you have millions of people who live there. And so maybe there is a kind of complementary between the kibbutz system on the one hand and urban subsistency in cities. But I do think that we can learn much from the kibbutz example. Then Cuba, I've never been there, of course, because I don't fly, right? But I do not think that Cuba is a very good example, because without political freedom, I do not think that it is adequate or acceptable to create any sustainable development. So there are some tendencies in the political framework of Cuba that I do not accept. But on the other hand, 2 decades ago, when the Soviet Union broke down, there was really lots of people feared that there would be a great poverty or famine in Cuba. And the government in Cuba and the local authorities, even in Havana, really managed to prevent Cuba from big poverty because of urban gardening, because of resilient structures in the nutrition, for example, organic farming, and so on. So there are very good examples, and we can learn from it. But the technological level in Cuba is not high enough. Very old cars, only few the energy system, for example, is not acceptable. So I do think that Cuba is maybe below the target corridor. That means that even in Cuba, more technological change, that means more investment in technological infrastructure may be adequate. So that we can reach a kind of balance in Cuba, balance between a modern society, even from the perspective of modern production using technologies, for example, renewable energies and so on, and on the other hand, learning from the projects of self-sufficiency and organic farming and so on. And one more remark to the question of dictatorship or democracy. I really do not think that the transformation towards post-growth economy maybe end in a dictatorship. What I think is, if we do nothing and wait for the next crisis, then the danger that there will emerge a kind of dictatorship is much higher. This is my point.
Sorry, it's one short question because it's really connected to this. I'm very sorry for it. I want to follow the discussion a bit more, and I also had a similar question. The keywords, I think it's cultural identity. This is not really close to that topic right now. Also, Cuba as an example is also, a political isolation example. But the topic we present right now is post-economic growth. Is it a vision, and will we stay there for, in the future, in the next 50 years, will we then stay on that level as an industrialized country for 20 years? Because I learned at school in former days that golden Viereck-Ökonomie, the golden rectangle of economics, and there is one part of that, one of the corners is economic growth as always as an aim to target for a stable economy. So the question is right now, just to sum it up, is it a vision? And do you have any kind of example? Because the examples we heard right now did not really fit to that idea. Neither Cuba nor the other one, like Cuba. And does it mean we will stay there for a longer time, the post-growth economy? Or will it then also come into the next peak? Because you said it's never a peak.
Yeah. I do not have enough time to explain all the institutional change that we need on the enterprise level, on the level of combining different institutions, firms, and so on. Even I do think that we need a kind of transformation of the bank system, for example. So we need new currencies without interest rates, maybe. Also, we need democratic forms of enterprises where all the employees also can decide if we have to exploit any capital that we have invested to have the technological hardware. This is not communism or socialism, but it has to do with different institutions of firms. It has to do with so-called commons, like Lena Ostrom worked on, and she got the Nobel Prize, as you already know. So these are also kinds of regulations, kinds of transformations in a political, in an institutional, legislative way that we need to stabilize a very, very small industrial sector so that not takes place what you just mentioned, that after reaching a level on which we are meet all the ecological constraints, and then once again there is a rising of the growth. So what I gave you here was a very, very simplified description of the real economy part. But I would need more time to explain what the money sector, the bank sector, and the the creation of new institutions would have to contribute to a situation where we could stabilize a modest output, so that it's not a vision to foresee that this might be a solution in the long run. You know?
Of course, it's just a model, but there's no exemplary country,
No,
for example,
of
Sweden,
course not.
that will
No.
reach in the next 10
No.
10 years this post-growth because they are that happy with ecology.
It would be really a historical unique transformation that we need. And I mean, on the other hand, the combination of different crises that we see is also a very unique event in the history of mankind. Therefore, we also need a unique solution for it.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions. We have microphones.
I'm Sarah Shelby from Egypt. Just have a question. You mentioned that GDP is very necessary for countries to get higher income, but there's some countries that not have low GDP, like GCC countries, and they still having higher income because of their natural resources. So, what is the motive for such countries to go for sufficiency model, and they are the main wealth coming from the exporting the natural resources? The second question, I'm just asking, the sufficiency, as you said, having inputs, time and crafting, and I don't remember the third, but if crafting here, if I did crafting without technology, this means it would take a lot of time, so that people will be just able to satisfy their local needs. So this will lead to growth economy or not? Thank you.
Oh, I'm not sure whether I got your point. The first part of the question was, what about countries that have lots of mineral resources, and of course there is a kind of temptation to use these resources to foster economic growth and to become a rich consumer society, right? Of course, it's very difficult to answer how we can prevent these countries from repeating the mistakes that other industrial nations did. But on the, I do think, for example, take a look on China. Even China reached a point at which it is not possible to stabilize the Chinese economy by using their own resources. They have to take resources, minerals, for example, from Africa. Also, in China, there are lots of escalations, I would say, because of the environmental damages that implies that even the health of the people decrease in big cities, for example. I do think that there is no perspective for countries, for example, in Asia or Africa or Latin America, to repeat the industrial development of Europe, because they very, very fast they will experience limits to growth. And also, I do not think that the resources that may be discovered are really the only factor that you need to become an industrialized consumer society. You also need other forms of inputs. You need, for example, skills, human capital, and so on. And before these countries are able to create all these other factors that are needed as a complement to the minerals, we do have global crises, so that these countries are forced to develop a different plan of wealth. Or what are the examples for these situations that you just mentioned?
I just mentioned GCC countries because they already have low GDP according to countries, I mean, like Germany or others.
Yeah.
But still they have high income per capita as Germany and other European countries. But they are not producing, they have dependency on the natural resources. So I mean, what is the motive for those people or those countries to employ or apply? Yes, apply is not sufficient because they already have enough wealth from exporting their natural resources.
I mean, the motivation could be to get more resilient, because there is a kind of trade-off between the perspective of getting rich very fast and to have a kind of security, because the higher you fly, the deeper you fall if there is a crisis, for example, caused by the dynamics of financial markets or the dynamic of resource prices. And this is also what we learned from Cuba, for example, and what we learned from Greece. This is a bad example, because there was no resilience. There was a dream of getting a modern European consumer society, but there was no basis for it, no material basis for it, and there was no industry. There was no value-added system. There was only a kind of subsidy, that was all. And after a crisis, there was a very, I do think it's not only an economic but also a social disaster. It would have been better to have a modest level of consumption, but a very stable, a resilient level. And maybe this is also a contribution for more political stability. This is the historical lesson from the growth paradigm that does not work in the future.
Okay, last question.
Thank you for the privilege for the last question. I won't let it waste. My name is Matt. I come from the US. I was a former crack engineer. By the way, Marion King Hubbard, the discoverer of Earth's peak oil, he actually wrote the seminal paper that describes the process of petroleum production. Just I have somewhat of an economic question. Recalling Joseph Schumpeter in Creative Destruction and all that, he describes conjunctive cycles, which kind of describes the modern capitalistic way of growing, which is to overinvest, heavily indebt these companies that have the next wave of things, the next new technology. For example, like the companies that built the railroads for that links coast to coast of America, they all went bankrupt, annihilated. So this question kind of combines a lot of things about how renewable energy will fit into post-growth, as well as the debt, as well as 3D. But the way renewable energy today is being made is it's being manufactured through a very highly long supply chain industrial structure. And so the way it's going about it is we are being put into the industry as workers, as sacrificial lambs to an industry that is supposed to collapse at the end due to a Kondratiev cycle, right? We need this large surge in order to get there, and then we have these factories to make more renewables, but we don't need any more, so we gotta stop right there. So my question is, in order to eliminate this Kondratiev cycle, we need individuals to kind of more or less produce their own. What do you think about 3D printing and renewables? Is that the new vision?
What?
3D printing.
Fab labs. 3D printers.
3D printers, yes. Of renewable energy, 3D printed solar cells.
You mean these machines
Yeah.
for fab labs? Fab labs. Fab labs.
Self-manufactured solar
Yes, but 3D printers, okay, I do think, I always thought that another expression, synonym for it is the fab lab. A laboratory of fabbing.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so I okay, so I understand what you mean. Okay, so concerning Josef Alois Schumpeter, who is the founder of innovation research and who used the picture of creative destruction. I do think that Schumpeter should have learned more about entropy, thermodynamics, because there is no ecological problem that you can solve in a closed thermodynamical system. This is the point. So you only can shift problems, but you cannot solve them. And all the attempts to create a technological visions by using the logic of Kondratiev cycles is a kind of modern religion. It's not science. It's a system of beliefs, you know. So if we believe in this kind of historical development, we shift the fate of human mankind into the dependency of a technological progress that did not place yet. So you only can believe and pray that this should take place. And this is more science fiction or a new religion. So now to the question with the 3D printers. I really think this is once again kind of technological vision, because how are these 3D printers produced? Of course, that maybe you can run such a fab lab with renewable energy because they use electricity. So there is a perspective, of course. But what can you produce with a 3D printer? A notebook, a t-shirt, furniture, only plastic elements, as far as I know. In some cases there are modern or newer versions of the 3D printers that are able to create metal elements. But there are 95 or 98, it's only a broad estimation, 98% of the things that you call material welfare cannot be reproduced or copied by a 3D printer. But I would not like to argue that 3D printers are bad or something. For example, a sharing system. If you have a network, a repair network, 20, 30, 50 people, and there is one 3D printer to reproduce elements that you need to repair things or to enhance the using periods. This would be a good solution. But if every household gets a 3D printer, you need a new industry, more energy, and maybe you have lots of garbage because not everything is a success what you try to print. This is one of the newer experiences that we face concerning the development of fab labs and 3D printers, as far as I know.
Great. Thank you very much.